A paradoxical reformer. A paradoxical reformer is someone whose impact is what? Contradictory. They may be celebrated for what they built, maybe democracy and what? Peace, while being criticized for what they allowed to remain or what they dismantled in the process, economic leverage and traditional structures. So a paradoxical reformer is someone whose impact is what? Contradictory, right? What he did, it's both positive and what? Negative, right? Whatever Nelson Mandela did for South Africa, it's paradoxical because it's both positive or negative, or it brought positive and negative impact to South Africans. It had both pros and cons to South Africa, right? In the sense that he brought democracy or equality what? In South Africa. He brought peace to South Africa, but he dismantled certain things, right? He couldn't bring what? Economic leverage to the black South Africans. Right? He couldn't bring economic leverage to the black South Africans, or he allowed the white people to stay and own, right? And own most of the lands and businesses and properties in South Africa. He gave the economy to what? To the white South Africans. Even if he allowed the white people to stay, he could have what? As well as collected or taken all the lands and properties from the white South African people and given it to what? The black South African people, because it was for the black people before the white people came to South Africa, and they sacked or took these properties and land from the black South Africans by force. So why not take it and give it back to the black South Africans, even if you allow them to stay in South Africa? Right? So this is the genesis of what? Xenophobia in South Africa. This is what is causing or making black South Africans now behave the way they behave towards African nationals in South Africa. These are the things. Nelson Mandela is one reason, or is a reason, or played a major, or is a factor in the xenophobia behavior or culture of South Africans, black South Africans now, right? And also lack of formal education. They were given the Bantu education, where they were taught only to speak the language or understand and communicate the language, which is the foreign language, or their colonial masters their language, which is the English or the Dutch language, right? And not given formal education, right? Also, they were made to feel inferior, right? They were made to think or see themselves as what? Not human, or low class what? Humans, and also see the white people as what? First class people who are next to God. And the Asians, so right, the segregation in South Africa is also the cause of what? This xenophobia culture rising in black South Africans. Also, they because they didn't have the education, and they didn't see the effort, the contribution of most African countries towards the fight against what? Apartheid. Most of them, they are ignorant, or they don't know the energy, the resources, the money most African countries contributed in fight against apartheid in South Africa. These are the reasons why South Africans are behaving the way they are behaving. So we shouldn't judge them. We shouldn't judge them or pass judgment on them, but we should know this and know ways and means on how to go about it, or like live with them or understand them and find the solutions to their problems now.
Ani bia ba wiase sisi anya sama ye kan ye tete asem ene bebre akọ school bebre sua de bebre hwe wo internet so hu se ye ne omo no ye ba ko anya akra na appetite time no wo hu ni se Nigeria for bo mo pa Ghana for yes ye nyina bo mo enti anya nto mu nimpo se ye kan mo e wo bibia mu na se mo ni ba biri obi mpo a e wo se ye abrofo no na nye ye bibifo na ye to mu krom no enti omo ni bia nduru ho
mpache nduru ho me ka.
So the host is asking Dr. Yafrempong Anochile that currently there is civilization, right? There's technology, there is like the world is a global village, right? Like news spread, we are seeing what's going on in other countries, right? Like now there's civilization and what what's the word, right? So what the host is asking, because of technology and civilization, everything that's happening in the world, and we've seen what's going on in the world, don't they know, or haven't they read the history of Africa fighting against what? Colonialism, slavery, fighting against white people in our continent, and also the contribution of what? African people towards their fight against apartheid in their country, South Africa. How many South Africans, black South Africans, see or they what? Knowing the history of what happened in South Africa, the contribution some African countries made towards what? The gaining what? Political independence from what? The Dutch and the English people or the white people in South Africa. Let's listen to what the answer or reply Mr. Dr. Anochi Frimpong will give to this question.
Was a matana South Africa pe mko University of Cape Town na meka kira wo play ne say yeshia South Africans ni edi nkoma eye esoro nipa kakra bi ene nim ni ayaya de ma ho. The vast majority of the people no o masama o ya pa omu nim ni ayaya ma no omu nim so omu nuanom ne yai ni omu nim an so omu ye kokko sabe omu ma no hips ankase omu nim so omu nuanom ene yen kakra bi na nim.
So Dr. Frimpong Anochi is saying most South Africans don't know or most South Africans are ignorant of the contribution most African countries did or made towards what? The fight against apartheid. It's just a small percentage of what? Of the black South Africans who know the history or who know how we contributed to what? To their political independence or sovereignty. It's just a small percentage of them, but most of them are ignorant. They don't know. They have no idea that we are part of them. We are one race. We are all Africans. We are one people, right? Most of them have no idea. They know how to be what? North Africa, right? That like when we are not from South Africa, right? They categorize all of African nationals who are not from South Africa to come from North Africa. That's their whole understanding of what? The African continent. Most of them, that's their mentality. That's their that's what they know about what? Africa, the African continent. They don't know that we have countries like Ghana, Nigeria. Like then they categorize all of us as North Africans. So looking at this mentality, looking at this level of what, understanding of what, of the African continent, you can't blame them much if they don't even know that we contributed to the fight against what? Apartheid. Can't blame them much because they lack education. They didn't get the education some African countries got, right? Also, they don't have any skills. Right? Also, they were made to feel inferior. The inferiority system that the whites introduced in Africa, it was everywhere. But with South Africa's own, it was worse. Right? Because countries like Ghana, like this, with our own, it was white and black. That was just it. But with South Africa, we had the whites. We were the first class people. We had the Asian people who were the second class people. We had the colored people who are maybe mixed race or what, or light skinned South Africans, black South Africans. And we had what? The black South Africans who were what? The low class people. So theirs was what? Was worse.
And we are so sawasha. It is a abatuwe ya yetui. Womu pa enim ne yede abatoa ede ye pa no wahu Ghana population you can 100% omo enim the value of abatoa just about 10% and until na buama delegates no wopa ye wiase nipa bi obi a wa be nim nyansa te se Kofi Annan mo type ni bi na wan nya sika mfa ma delegates ne that day a masa akofa kraman kura be gina ho sabe Ghana fo anim na sa kraman ni betumi ama delegates ne nipa ba ko bia 1000 Ghana na wo ye Kofi Annan no 50 Ghana na 100 Ghana na wo betumi tua me pa cho mo nto ma Inti Ghana for sanity, we are not better than the South Africans. Yen kura from day one. Yen education abesi enano. The vast majority of us no. Ajuna wo yetim no sabe. Nyese bidi obi atom obi enim. Say nye ahibia.
So, Doctor, your report Anochi doubled down and saying that even big Ghanaians, Nigerians, that from day one we were educated, or we had this high level of what education. To date, we don't even know the importance of what elections in Ghana and Nigeria. So, for example, in Ghana here, someone, a citizen, an ordinary Ghanaian can open his mouth and tell you that if they bring a dog as a flag bearer of maybe NDC or MPP. NDC and MPP are political parties. They are the main two political parties in Ghana here. And over 30 years now, they've come to power, right? MPP will come to power, and then the following year, tenure, NDC will also come to power with what? They are flag bearer. So he's making an example that even Ghanaians, that we got education, we got the higher level of education from day one during the colonial times and all that times. Some of us don't even know the importance of elections, in the sense that a Ghanaian citizen, an ordinary Ghanaian citizen will open his mouth and tell you that even if they bring a dog, a cat, a non-living thing as a flag bearer of maybe NDC or MPP, he's going to vote for what? For that political party, because he believes because he associates with that specific political party. Whether the political party is doing good or bad, is performing well or not, he has to vote for that political party, which is not the president for what? For elections, or for electing a leader to what? To develop your country. That is not the reason for elections. So even be that we have that higher level of education, we are not that different, right, from the South Africans who didn't have that type or level of education. I don't know if I'm making sense.
So me who yenka I mean colonization ba Africa no abrofo no Portugal for Britain for mu nyina akọ. Now then South Africa for no tumi tena homa abrofo no establish omo de man kwa say South Africa be omo man na eno de omo yi omo ni a omo ni ma bibifo and omo tata omo.
Eno na me yi one.
So the host is asking, almost all African countries in the African continent were able to drive away their white colonial masters out of their countries, out of their individual countries. So why is it that only South Africa is the only African country in Africa where they allow the white people establish, right? They didn't sack them, but also they have allowed them to establish themselves in South Africa, and now they are what's called white South Africans, and they are even fighting for their independence in South Africa. They want to separate themselves from what? South Africa, right? Recently, I've been seeing news from South Africa that these white people, the minority white population in South Africa, they want their independence. They want to make their own country and name it or call it the Orange Country. I don't know if I'm right. They are planning to name it the Orange Country or something like that, right? Why weren't South Africans able to sack and drive away the white people in South Africa, just like most African countries in Africa? But they've allowed them to stay and establish themselves and now controlling or having the economy of South Africa in their hands. What happened? Let's listen to the answer.
Baby, I no nipa ne buy no so onko beka ho. Na freedom, freedom no. Mpacho nowhere in the world that on silver platter. ABC that. Baby, you fight for your own freedom. What is say be akwebi. Obi yusu anope wia anajo. No one wunu kwan obefa so a. Obeje ofa ahudie no wadwane a. Nipa na de onfa emma wo da. Enti South Africa for the eni ya eni bre and the fight ya omo break it down apartheid no. Ade omo ntimi anye no because Holland na mekoko hu ye. Wo ko Hollanda. Omo asi a building more or less like a city, a whole city. Nanka Dutch aborɔfo no anim sɛ wɔn population na ɛdɔɔso wɔ South Africa nti by 1994 no a South Africa yɛde more or less wɔn fa ahodie ma wɔn no wɔn nim sɛ bibifoɔ no Mandela bɛpam wɔn nyinaa nti na Dutchfoɔ sisi adan ready to receive their citizens from South Africa. Unfortunately Mandela ma no ho kwan ma aborɔfo no ne kasa mɔte aseɛ sɛ aborɔfo no bɛkɔ so atena ɔman no mu ma wɔn nyinaa ayɛ baako ɛbaa ne saa no wɔntumi anye wɔn agyapadeɛ nso amfiri wɔn nsam wɔabrɛ sɛ Kwame Nkrumah nka waa wonim sɛ wia ketee nkɔbɛpam wagye wagyapadeɛ no de ne nyinaa ma ne nuanom abibifoɔ na ɛbaa ne saa nso de anka abibifoɔ ne kɔ wɔnim na wɔn ntumi angye agyapadeɛ biara ama wɔn no na kyerɛ sɛ wɔn tim ne wɔn tim. Number 2 education. Mede Ghana deɛ yɛ mfato ho sɛ ɔsagyefo hu sɛ aborɔfo no hyɛ da wɔama norderners education. They were just used as labor force nti ɛyɛ sɛ ɔman no nyinaa hu wɔn mmɔbɔ nneɛma wɔn free education anyɛ sɛ anka norderners no nkɔm so bɛdane te sɛ Boko Haram foyi ahayɛ ɛnɔm ntumi nyɛ saa because they have received the best of education ɛna yɛnyɛ discrimination biara yɛne wɔn te ɛte sɛ nnua. There's no difference. In the case of South Africa abra apartheid follow yɛ no na nka sɛ yɛhyɛ de nya special package for the black people ɛma wɔn special dispensation be especially in terms of education. Mpacho ANC for na ɛbɛgye wɔn man ni si wɔn anyɛ bibia ama wɔn nti sɛ ne saade a ɛne bibini bi a ɔbɛhu no wɔn ne mmaa mu sɛ bibini no ɛyɛ no ne ho bɛyɛ na bufu adentira ɔno ne na ti the same area nti so yɛ a wɔ ho nti nipa no ho bɛyɛ na abufu titiri Zimbabwe kuta good education pa to ɔmo na kɔ South Africa gyegye wɔn nnwuma ni nyinaa ayɛ efiri wa Ghana ne Nigeria for nti wɔn ho yɛ wɔn abufu all because of poor leadership. Wow.
Papa yanko ye chikakra ne hwe apartheid no.
So basically independence, you can't gain independence on a silver platter. Nowhere in the world has any country gained its independence on a silver platter. Right? Ghana like this, those who were on the forefront fighting for independence, most of them died. They shed their blood for us to gain the independence. Countries like China also suffered. They really suffered under Japan, under Britain. So independence nowhere in the world was never given on a silver platter. But unfortunately for South Africans, not only were they fighting for independence, but also they were also fighting against apartheid. So after they dismantled apartheid, Nelson Mandela allowed himself to be convinced and manipulated by what? By the white people, the minority white population in South Africa, to what allowed them to stay in South Africa. And in doing so, they were in control of the economy. Right? And he gave an example that he once traveled to Holland and he realized something, that there is a city that was built primarily for white the Dutch people in South Africa who will be returning to Netherlands or the Holland, right? Because they feared that once Nelson Mandela dismantles apartheid and he's able to gain independence, complete or absolute independence from the whites, he was going to sack the white people from the country South Africa. So the Netherlands or Holland had built a city, had built houses, right? Structures to welcome and accept its citizens from South Africa. But unfortunately, Nelson Mandela allowed himself to be convinced and manipulated by this minority white population in South Africa.
Nima de crop. Yate say Nigeria ne Ghana for any African country be bring support you mo. Eno na e dia de say sika na ye say Nigeria tam de ko support you mo no. Na apartheid na e den.
Ye ka apartheid a Dutch word meaning to separate, separation. Nti na ye embere bi apartheid ne ye system a abrofo no de bo wo ho ban e wo ho say enye se bibini eben broni e wo kwan bia so. Nti wo South Africa sisi a ba bia kuro papa te say Cape Town wa yesisi ya ne kama Uko so wakwa yi pe ya Johannesburg. Uba Johannesburg airport yeah Pan-Africanist ni eduru hope ni yesu. Joburg airport no. Masa nye bi ne Accra International Airport na bibia ni wa South Africa e kire say where bibifuo kuro bibia ni ho nkofo ne build wo mine so mo build no matena ho na be ye first world country and indeed that's the way eti na we nso awakọ ba bi de.
So the meaning of apartheid, that was what the host asked Honorable Dr. Frimpong Anochi, that what is the meaning of apartheid, or what's the origin of apartheid. And yes, he's explaining that basically apartheid is to separate, and it's a Dutch word, or it came from the Dutch language, right? And the reason the white people introduced apartheid to South Africa was because they came to South Africa to settle, which is the settler colonialism. They came there to settle, so they had to build the place or the country South Africa as their home. Right, they have to put things in place to make the place feel like home. And he's giving an example like when you look at Johannesburg's airports, when you look at the big cities in South Africa, which is occupied by the white people, it looks nothing like most African cities in Africa. Right, it looks nothing like most cities in African countries, but it looks more like cities in Europe, because they were building the place or South Africa just like home, because they came there to settle, they came there to live there and stay there and make the place their home, which is basically the settler colonialism. So in doing so, they had to separate themselves from the black people. That was why they introduced apartheid in South Africa.
Bide Guguletu ene Langa ene ade a ye fa ne township before net wo masa ukodu wo mo be ye wo mobo eti sa wakọ krokase bi te sa Xima na Elmina na Ningo na wotra kro na fe mpo anofo paa no a wo mo chi na mepunu no wo mo dan no a wo mo tititim na no bi na before titim ewo South Africa na sa na abrofo eye no mo passe mra bi fa ne Group Areas Act. Inti group biya ni baby a womote baby a shiafo te ne nipa tuntumi ntumi nkɔ hɔ baby a broni te ne nipa tuntumi entumi enkɔ hɔ ɛna to da bia broni kura kuta ne kraman ye di notice about no animal here, no animal here broni ne kraman no wetwem ye bibini na oduru ane apamu sesan wachi. That should tell you say bibini ni ye animal inti apart.
So he's saying that the apartheid was worse to the point that there will be a sign which reads no animal here, right? There will be a sign in South Africa which reads no animals here, but a white person will enter that space or that go past that sign which reads no animals here with his dog, with his or her dog, walking his dog and enter that space, enter that room or go past the sign and will be allowed. But you as a black South African, when you are entering that room which has a sign or notice that no animals here, you'll be sacked or you won't be allowed to enter that room. So that was how worse the apartheid system was in South Africa. The segregation system was in South Africa. Right?
Apartheid ni apa achira no se ye de man ni nyina meka South Africa man e de hye broni ensa na bibini de ya pam no nti se wo bibini bia wo broni efia no your house boy and a house girl me patcho 6 p.m. pepe ese wo free wana wo dimirika wo kuta bus pass na wo free eyi ni mu city ni mu broni ni area ho adentra o mu sure say there can be blood say be a sex beba wontem na asay the purity of the white race ni omo de ye no eno.
So at one point the white people introduced a group act where this is where white people live, right? This society is occupied by what? White people. This society is also occupied by what? Asian people, which is the second class people. This society is also occupied by what? The colored people, which are the mixed race or the light skinned black South Africans. And this area 2 is also occupied by what? The black South Africans. And so, if you should see a black South African in a white neighborhood, that means that person is maybe a security person, right? Or a house help or a housemaid, right? And even with that, by 6 p.m. in the night, you have to what? Get a bus pass and leave that neighborhood. Because the whites feared that these black people who were working in their houses, right, who were doing this inferior jobs in the white neighborhood, they fear that they might have what? Intimate relationships with some of their white people, and it was going to destroy the purity of the white race in that white neighborhood. So even if you are working in this white neighborhood, by 6 p.m. you have to what? You have to leave that neighborhood and go to your black neighborhood, which is called the townships, right? Most of those inhabitants, right, habitats of where it's occupied mostly by what? Black South Africans. Those places are called what? The townships.
No. And the Mandela mo entimi ansesa no. Nti se washa. Woni bisa abrofo pe Mandela sempa.
Yes.
Na wuti wiase na broni pe wasema. E se hu se wo problem kase pa.
So we all know that the white people, all the African leaders who were fighting for the independence for their individual African nations or countries, we all know that amongst all of them, it's Nelson Mandela who the white people like the most, because he allowed himself to be convinced and manipulated by what? By them. So you as an African leader and the white people or the West or the European countries like you, right? They call you what? Or they tag you as a good leader in Africa. You should know that. Then you are either kissing their ass, right? Or you are either allowing yourself to be convinced and manipulated by them. But when you are doing things contrary to what they want you to what, or how they want you to run your individual country, then they are going to label or tag you as what? As bad news to what? To your country. And that was what they did to Kwame Nkrumah, right? They did the same to Kwame Nkrumah, and they overthrew Kwame Nkrumah with the help of what? Some Ghanaians, by the Kotoka, right? They did the same to Gaddafi of Liberia or of Libya. They did the same to Idi Amin of Uganda. Is it Uganda or Congo? Yeah, one of that central countries. Yeah, they did the same to Sankara of Burkina Faso. And even currently they are doing the same to what? To Ibrahim Traore. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. Because he's not allowing himself to be convinced and manipulated by what? By the West. He's fighting for his people. He's doing what's necessary of him to develop his country and the livelihood and well-being of his people. And that is something that the West hates. The West dislike.
Now, have you realized that Rastafarians no use Mandela photo? When is that?
Yes, there.
You see his Selassie.
Almost a sellout.
Sell out. Bro.
No,
say very good. Yeah. Now if it's Rastafarians no majim. You see Kwame Nkrumah if I say his Selassie. That should tell you say obi enim ne de. Nya Mandela nka ebeye late kakra nsa no ma anya ne omohwe na mom ka omo bedru achiri pa.
Enti Mandela no waye kumfu dum for South Africa for ana.
Me pa cha onye kumfu dum for ye okumfu pa onye odumfu. Oye okumfu pa onye odum amoboa abibima wo bibiem. And up till now abrofo da so support no. Enti when we say President Atta Mills declare holiday for Kwame Nkrumah na ye friend no Founders Day no. Founder with apostrophe S no. When we say need answer na abrofo no so declare World Mandela Day Edema Mandela for obi asabe na dwumu no a continue so obetan Kwame Nkrumah no wado Mandela obi a wanye bibia ma bibiman wanya hwe ya man ade ba kokoro ye me ya pa tama Nigerian president bi Abacha no chichi ogoni leaders kansaro wiwamo no ye na dwen so obekum won that time na the most respected face in Africa was Nelson Mandela. nti bibime nyina de ani to Mandela nim so betumi aka bi ama wo madachefo ne saa abacha yi agya kansara wuwa Mr. Mandela nyina ni to ba bi kra makumiye nuanom ogonifo no abasa nkroma nka ne besi wa bibime mu kan nke bi sida but Mandela will not do that no broni sane nyankopon eno na one na yire ne no entamu anya fine da no no broni say na se mire bi ya ka kire Mandela so mpamo abrofo no o can plane and it was published everywhere in the world say opamo broni de ne nyansa ne civilization eko wo ka say anade na wo pa kire bibini
So at one point in Africa's history, most African people told or asked Nelson Mandela to sack and drive away the white people in this country, South Africa. And Nelson Mandela replied that if I sack these people, these white people from my country, they are going to go with their civilization and their what and their intelligence and their developmental growth, right? Their development or ability to what to help develop my country for me. So I'm not going to sack them. He said it plainly, right, to the rest of Africa, and it was published everywhere in the world. And because of statements like this, and because of decisions and actions like this from Nelson Mandela, he not gaining absolute independence, both economical and political independence from black Africans. Because of things like this, Rastafarians up to date don't like Nelson Mandela, and they don't use any of his photos or they don't acknowledge that Nelson Mandela was a good leader or a good personality or a great African personality in Africa. They don't acknowledge that, they don't appreciate him as compared to people like Haile Selassie of Ethiopia and Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of what, Ghana, right? Rastafarians cherish and praise Kwame Nkrumah and Haile Selassie rather than what, or more than Nelson Mandela. They don't acknowledge him at all. They don't acknowledge him because of he saw the white people as what, as God or superior than him, and saw black people as what, not humans or inferior.
Council, my membusa we yo. Owura bi asori was South Africa. Ye ka say kwa no. Ya hye sonko da fiase Julius Malema. Yes. Ono so oye hwan was South Africa o.
Oh, why abemu bi ano ye ANC youth leader. Na ideas na woni tirimu no. Enya ideas obetumi de atena ye friend say ANC. Etisa wo ba Ghana hasia. Wo na no campaign a Baumia ane ba kono kra de say Ken Japan. Wo mu ye no. Masa MPP as a party no. Omo ye writers, capitalists. And a bibia and Nkrumah stand for bia ya de ya one time ye wo ebufu. Ana Ken Japan what MPP. Now the Kwame Nkrumah di campaign. So no ne wo mentor. Wa be MPP for mentor any JB dankwa. What you say? Any omo aka no. Nti definitely say who say MPP as a party no. What is second Japan what na mu a enye ye.
So the host asks, now there's a new figure or new personality in South Africa who is also campaigning for the economic independence for what? For black South Africans, who goes by the name Julius Malema. Julius Malema, who recently has been sentenced to prison, right? And Dr. Yao Anoche Frimpong answers that Julius Malema was once a youth leader of the ANC party, right? He was once a leader of the youth arm in what, ANC, but he realized that his ideas was different from the ideas or the policies or the path, right, that the ANC leaders was on. It was different from his. So he had to what? He had to break away and form his own party. And one main difference between Julius Malema and the ANC is he is fighting for what? Economic growth or economic strength for what? Black South Africans. He is fighting for the economic independence for what? Black South Africans, where ANC is just fighting for what? The apartheid. And he made an example that back in Ghana here, I mentioned earlier the MPP party, right, who are now currently in opposition. During the 2024 elections, during the campaign times, before they will bring out, the MPP will bring out their flag bearers, they had to what? Vote for their flag bearers. And it was two main people who were contested for the flag bearership of what? The MPP party. And they were Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who was previously Vice President of what? His Excellency Nanado Adudankwa. Right. And the next contestant was Honorable Kennedy Ejapon. Right. During their primaries or flag bearership elections, Honorable Kennedy Ejapons policies or ideas for the party was different from the party's aim and goal or ideas or policies, and his ideas and policies resonated or was noted with the grassroots of the party, right? The grassroots of the MPP party resonated or were able or could relate and love or liked his policies and ideas. But the delegates or the leaders in the MPP party, they liked more of Mahmoud Bawumia's policies and agenda because they were in that direction. They are capitalist people. The MPP party is a capitalist people or the rightist people, right? You can call them the capitalists or the rightist people, right? That's their agenda as a political party. So Kennedy Japan had to break away from the MPP, and now currently I think he has formed a new party which he calls the Base Party, but he hasn't come out publicly yet to declare that this is his new party. But there are rumors here and there that the Base Party is formed by Honorable Kennedy Japan, and I've done a video about that. Go check it out. Scroll through my videos, you see it. So it's the same with Julius Malema in South Africa. He was once part of the ANC party, but he realized that the path that ANC were on wouldn't help South Africa or wouldn't help black South Africans. So he had to break away.
Ghana ni bi ehu omu to abai me nyasho say 2 years kuraba obi anim say nkroma policies no dey can e dey any campaign. Now when you go to South Africa, Julius Malema na kwa is a junior Kwame Nkrumah bisa and junior Lumumba and somebody like Traore. And the idea say when it no, they cannot contain him there. Na me bompa is Nyankopon ebehwe no so. Anya sa near to nkofo bi te say Steve Bantu Biko ene Mobet so Biko emu no anhwa ebi betimi ato no.
So Dr. Yao Anoche is saying that he sees the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah and Lumumba, Professor Lumumba, and those great leaders like a prime Traore currently in Julius Malema. He sees Julius Malema to be junior Kwame Nkrumah because of the ideas, his agenda towards what black South Africans liberation from what economic for them gaining or having the higher strength or bigger strength in terms of the economy in South Africa. But he's praying that it doesn't end up like some of these great leaders, right? Like Steve Biko of Nigeria, I think, and Sankara, where they were assassinated by the white people, or the West, or the European countries, right? He's praying that Julius Malema doesn't end up like those people, where he'll be assassinated or killed, right? And praying for more strength and vision and ideas and positivity for him, so he brings the change or the growth or the power to black South Africans in South Africa.
Oh, you mbet mekuno. And omu musician no cry friends and omu kumu. Lucky Dube. Me call hono. Me call a year friend say. Baby, your tone album music. Ibi omu na nyomo. Omu peninu. kura enti me kura na menya South African citizen asabio me kwakwaso German kwhwe kwam no me hu say no need long life for South Africa but na yam nwanwa so da so te kurom ho na wo bo nwom di tia won system no ukọ South Africa yen kasa ntia pani te se Ghana ha no a sabi obi tumi kasa tia wo chen na santen ne doma hene ne ya na na ye no omu ho no eyachi wade
So basically in South Africa, you can't talk against an elderly person or someone who has position or someone in a position of what power, right? You can't criticize people in power or people in government, right? You can't criticize them, right? So whether they are performing or not, they are incompetent. You can't criticize them. You can't talk against them, right? I believe this culture is everywhere in Africa, even in Ghana here. You can't. People like me frown upon a young person talking against or criticizing an elderly person or someone in position of power or criticizing the government. We frown against it. But I think South Africa's own is worse. From what Dr. Anoche is saying, he's saying that South Africa's own is worse because a great personality like Lucky Dube, who is popular everywhere in Africa and has even crossed borders the Caribbeans, right? He is disliked in South Africa. Lucky Dube is disliked or was disliked in South Africa. People hated him. People hated him. People didn't like him. People because he was talking against or was criticizing the ANC party and the system in South Africa. He was talking against the poor leadership in South Africa. That was the reason why they assassinated Lucky Dube in South Africa. Lucky Dube was assassinated in South Africa, though he's a South African, right? And they assassinated him because he was talking against the poor leadership in South Africa and was talking against the government. He was criticizing the government in his songs and music. And Dr. Yao doubled down that he realized this because during his time in South Africa, anywhere he goes, like any music space where they sell musical materials like cassettes and the CDs and all that, it was difficult to find a Lucky Dube material in those musical spaces. And this is because they are trying to claim. Why clean his achievements or his history in South Africa? Because they dislike him. And they dislike him because he was talking against the government or the leadership in South Africa.
Mandela di we can't bone fa no
but omo practice democracy or
somehow
semi-democracy.
Na ho no why say we din won kasa ntia pani wo mo Mandela edimbone wo boni dimbone anan kwa ba yira brofo protect say din no pa ana wo ka sa money tia broni ampacho the next day wo ba yira besi nde nti wo mo wane de nti say wahwa wo say mera bi man we Robert Mugabe kan say me wo say ade ono wa yama Zimbabwe no
yes.
Mandela ntimi anya amani kromfo no bisa say dey no say mama mo asase me dem economy asem say me dem politics asem I've given you land, I've given you your economy, and then the political system belongs to you. It was a very big philosophical statement. Now what ha won ti ase because maybe metewa na President Kufuor okasa only masimo kai said the greatest leader ever I want who we ase no and only Mandela. In fact, Mayura Wipa, I got a president Kufuor, but not take with Yasono. Mayura would papa man because the year 2000, not the whole BBC listeners' choice. And to me, Casse, a friend is a we are seeing Ghana for the quarter of a year in Wakasa Ghana Nipa. No more Casse, the greatest man. Because the greatest African was Kwame Nkrumah. Na Papa Newu 1972. Nayam Fama Mandela. Now we are president of Ghana, certain president of Ghana. At that time, now we see the greatest leader and Mandela. That's I just am Mikasa Tuaso.
So Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe once said or made statement that what he has done for Zimbabwe is far more better than what Mandela did for South Africa because he was able to give the Zimbabwe people their economy. He gave them lands, he gave them political sovereignty, he gave them everything, absolutely everything. But Mandela was able to just dismantle apartheid, and this was a huge debate or something that was philosophical, like it was a huge philosophical statement that Robert Mugabe made, right? But if you don't understand the context, or if you don't understand what he's trying to say, you say he's just maybe envious of Mandela, or he's just saying something, right?
Wow. Papa, and come on, yamra back to your mama.
Yeah.
Yes, John Dramani mama. Now saying, Ninsamwa, or Hoka, ya, na Waka say, ano advocate say, Abrofono, Diombedi, as soon as said, you must see, Arian and fast on our so or Mopataye. Sassam no, also saying,
Miss Omisa, it was long overdue. Nanka see a new be or Sassam. Now I discovered they say, Omo dear Nimo Shas say cancer answer you kunkum womina. Even the last one was Nigerian billion.
So the host is asking Dr. Yao Anochafrepon that what is his take on His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the current president of Ghana, on he asking for reparations for the transatlantic slave trade and slavery and colonialism and all that. He asking for reparations for Africa and Black Americans or Black people all over the world, right? What is his take on that conversation? Let's listen to his answer.
MKO Abiola. Saying I may be president of Nigeria. Reparations no beka once. And the man died just like that. And for Mahama say, Otumi ekoka sasemu no. Mahama ye no ma mienu miensa bi wo ho. Eboa me ma ade amegidi wo wiase no. Mejimi hu di say ni amegidi ni menye mistake. I believe in predestination. Me a Christian, but I believe in predestination. Yenya wo John the Baptist ni enimi so obeba. Yenya wo Yesu Kristo ni enimi so obeba. Enti menso yenya wo me no. No be any made a me ba be ye wo wiase. Because nka be ye den be ye nwanwa say obibini bi betuma ko United Nations no wako gina bibifo ne abrofo anim wiase nyina anim no wako move sa motion no agye atom enka dede no ye ne ha no nke kumine ntamansa na waduru ho because abrofo ne sisi ye afa ye no move for 350 years 350 years no ye bibifo ye.
So basically, he said that he supports John Dramani Mahama, His Excellency, the current president of Ghana, and he's also surprised why President Mahama is still alive, because the previous or the leaders before who were fighting for these reparations were all assassinated by the West or these white people, right? All of them were all assassinated. There was one man called Abiola, who was a Nigerian, who was contesting or was an aspirant to be a president in Nigeria, and he had made it public that when he's voted in, he's going to talk about or he's going to ask for reparations for slavery and colonialism, and he was assassinated, right? He was just assassinated all of a sudden, right? He just died all of a sudden. So Dr. Yao Anochafrepon is saying that he's surprised that John Dramani Mahama was brave enough, courageous enough to go to UN and ask for these reparations, make this agenda, right? Make this motion, and he's still alive, and he's praying that they don't get him or they don't assassinate him.
Yeah, involved was about 45 million. 15 million died during the capture. 15 million died during the transportation to the Americas.
Yes.
And 15 million got there. So 45 million is now almost in a period of 350 years. And can be before to me aeroplanes, ships, mobile phones, nuclear weapons in the BBR. And Abrafon said that and indeed, a car slave trade policy no ho say bibini bia ode ne nsa ye bibia no ode na adwene ye bibi no so ye wi amanfo beto abrofo de ne ye nto nti sa nipa ne ye kum no nti wo mu haye na ye nuan eye mahama no otumi si ya ho ade na mese ne ya me wanwa ne so otumi akoka anya ne ti edidi mu a oda so te ase a afa de na wukum ne kura wanya yenya passe awie de nsa hyemra na so say it is a worst offense against the black race. And I think say some kroma ne start to ACAU headquarters yes say yede Muhammad no koka ho.
Wow.
Yes, because normal mienu na brofo no etiayen. The first one was slavery. Slavery ni free hope na ke fi say ho atoye and wo de fan say colonialism e bai nti say nkroma ne binu matuma akoaje free colonial rule na aka the earlier one abrofo no beji atum no motu ahu ska ni slavery no and papa we yatumi aye ono and luckily for Ghana no oye Ghana ni nti na je say wuli nkroma free wa ye wie Ghana atumi nipa watumi aka your friend say reparations once.
So I've done a video about this topic, the reparations that Africa and black people all over around the world are asking for because of slavery. Right, I've done a video about it, and my stand or my take about this whole conversation is I think it's not necessary. I think we are not developing our countries, right, and we are finding excuses or they are making excuses to say that the reason why they are not developing as African countries is because of slavery and colonialism. And I back this my take or this my stance with examples like countries like China. China was ruled, right, or was colonized by two different countries, right, by Japan and the British, the English. Right, and now look at China. They are developing like they are now even competing with US in terms of a superpower. So I think it's not necessary. I think our leaders are just finding ways and means, like they are pushing blame onto things that is not necessary, things that shouldn't be things that we shouldn't be pushing blames on or to. Right, I don't back or I don't agree with this reparations thing that we are asking for. That's happened, right? But what I believe or what I support with this whole reparations conversation is the acknowledgement that it's the greatest crime against humans in human history. That's the only thing I think makes sense, right? The acknowledgement, they accepting that indeed slavery was the greatest crime against Africans or people in the human history. But the monetary aspect of it, they paying or relieving us of debt and all that, I think it doesn't make sense, right? But he is saying that he supports it because 450 million Africans, right, died in this transatlantic slave trade business. Right, 50 million died during the capture of them. 50 million died during the voyage or on their way on the seas to the west or the Americas. Right, and 50 million got to the Americas or the west. Right, and so all these things, it's necessary that after they acknowledging that they should also pay some form of compensation, right? Because it's in the slavery rule or constitution that anything that a black person or a black slave does with his hand, like maybe a technology or something that any black slave invents, it is better, or though people will purchase that more than what the white inventions, so they need to assassinate or kill those black slaves who invent stuffs during the slavery period. And if those people were in Ghana or were in these African countries, like the West to be specific, Ghana or Western countries or African countries would have developed, or we wouldn't be here, like we'll be more advanced than this, right, than our current situation or level, right? That is his what he's using to back a stance on what he agreeing to the payment of reparations of the slavery period. And also he's also saying that he's surprised that His Excellency John Dramani Mahama is still alive and he has been able to escape. I don't know whether there has been an assassination attempt on his life, which is our president, but he's saying that he's surprised because, as I said earlier, leaders or people who ask for things like this were assassinated before they were able to speak out, right? And so he's asking that they build or they erect a statue of John Dramani Mahama at the AU headquarters, right? Because if Kwame Nkrumah's statue is there because he fought for what, or he fought against colonialism and he fought for independence for Ghana and Africa, then we should also erect John Dramani Mahama's statue because he has also fought for the reparations of what, slavery, because it's two crimes that the West or the Europeans or the white people committed against what, Africa, and these two crimes were slavery and colonialism. And if Nkrumah was able to what, to fight against colonialism, and we have erected Nkrumah's statue at the AU, then we should also erect John Dramani Mahama's statue at the AU because he has also been able to what, to fight against slavery or fight for the for reparations for what, for slavery.
Kwasi Broni waje atum. Ete so man we yedura chiri pa o.
Baba obi babusa say san komo na yewura Mahama kodi ho a ene omo yaji atum no. E de emfaso ni benya directly no. How would that benefit us?
The first emfaso wo mu no ene say
so the host is asking that what benefits directly are we going to gain from this reparations if it should be paid? If the West are going to pay it, how are we going to even benefit from it? What benefits are we looking forward to? Let's listen to the answer.
It is say bi obabi ameti na metwe mensa bo menua be yote me yesi no. Say me ya me ho say me mfa mensa emo no a be ye ne ya more. The moment meji atumi say me de mensa abono na maka sorry no atoni yem nti say before anya hwimpo the acknowledgement says slavery was the worst offense against the human race ever. No eye adekase pa.
So first his answer is the direct benefit we gain from this reparation conversation is at least we will be at peace if the West or Europe will acknowledge that or accept and agree that they've committed a crime against us, they've wronged us, they've stepped on our toes, and they are asking for what? For forgiveness. Right? At least we'll be at peace. Like we will be content if at least they can do that and ask for forgiveness from what? From Africans. That in the past our forefathers or we wronged you guys, right? We didn't treat you guys well. If that alone is done, at least Africans will find some peace, right? Or will be at peace.
Slavery against the black people. Eya de kese efeni atosu mienu no. Agana fo bebre ni me say before say John Dramani Mahama ebekọ abrochi akoka asem no na wadi kan alobi AU ema omo de a secretariat for reparations asiwo. That is an official office within the AU setup at the asiwa omo de an say they will work on reparations. Nti say na wakasa awie no efei na ye ba hwehwe who were the perpetrators. One muna edi adonkodwa ba ebibimam ha mpacho perpetrators no hwehwe wo manya den the whole of Western Europe Spain and Portugal na start here, but the biggest slave trading nation was Britain, and then Belgium and Holland munyina ka ho oti ase Portugal na medical Spain and Portugal na start here, Belgium, Holland, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Inti wo hwehwe countries no anya den kra ana who were the victims and also we shall wanya de ni akokofo na wasoro wani film a tuntumfo ni nyina they were the victims. Then the third step no any.
So he's saying that before Mahama went to UN to make or ask for these reparations, he has already lobbied the AU to create a small organization or committee within the AU whose only objective was to what? Was to discuss and work on what? Reparations. Right? That small organization's work or objective, primary focus is to work on what? Reparations. And to look for or point out the perpetrators. And those perpetrators too are the Western countries. Like, it's not difficult to find them or see the perpetrators doing for the slave crimes, right? The slavery crimes. They are, he said that Portugal and Spain were those who started the slavery in Africa. But the biggest people who took it to the next level were the British, right? The English people, which is currently England, right? They were the masters in this slavery business, right? And then Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, and those countries too joined later. And also the victims of this slavery too were what? Africans, right? When you take away the people in the north of Africa, right? The Moroccans, the Algerians, the Egyptians, and all those people, they weren't victims of transatlantic slave trade, right? They were victims of what? The Arab slave trade, right? So the rest, which is West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and South Africa, we are the victims of what? Of the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade.
And who gets what? Exactly. And just as President Dramani Mahama said it, you know, Yababe listen no maybe to say be a debt cancellation, technology transfer, and exchange, and Sanoma.
So the third benefit we gain from this reparations is John Dramani Mahama says they are going to bring out what they want or what they think Africans deserve from the reparations, what the West need to pay or use to compensate us. And some of them are debt cancellation, right? Whatever we owe either the IMF, the World Bank, or individual countries, like what we owe them during our bilateral collaboration and all that, they should cancel all those debts, right? That's one. Two, technology transfer, right? Things that were invented by black people, black slaves during the slavery time, and that has evolved to now. They should transfer all those things to Africa, or at least label it that it was invented by black people or African people, right? And more, like, the list hasn't come out, like the official list hasn't come out yet, but these are some of the things we are looking forward to get from these reparations.
Takes me back to, United Kingdom for no befa good every Ghana tutuni asantimamu edekoye. Sa asem no nokra ben wom nan sen akra 2024 yete say Britain for na returning a dozen of sa good no de koye. Papa history no e no kre o me fast.
So the host is asking, what's the truth in the West or the European countries during the slavery and colonialism time era of them stealing and taking away our arts, our gold, our resources, right? Taking all those things. What's the truth in it? And recently, 2024, I think England returned some gold arts of the Asante people back to Ghana, right? And I think I've done a video too on France accepting or agreeing to that they are going to return some stolen artifacts from Africa. Let's listen to what he will say.
Fans at the four gold koye. Na omudi biaba no krebe ne was asem.
Mpacho say you tin wan kasa mo yi wa yi bone. Ye bi asante for gold bebre ekoy. In fact 1874 February 1874 abra omo invade Kumase no. Na kasante for war the first stone house palace pampa so and some for the kwesi de ma wo mo asefo na ye settle wo mo kwada so area besi na for agric nzeba na wo mo hina fa na kansa board na chiri ba ne forma kotokocha ma che bo atu ma che ba fo why fata company na asefo wo ti ase wo mo edija to dan nim no mpa che so wo mo duru fie ho no mo bi edan no gold ayemu ma ntine eye won wan say ohena no kofi kakare ne nasefo ni nyina adwane agya gold no ho omu lodi ni nyina edikoy ana wo ba infante hanso a wini bafo nti na meka se yuti na wankasa be yi bone no they pretending say amfa wo mu gold anko abrofo no ajeje ebibifo no eye wini bafo ya omu gold nyina edikoy abra ebibifo na ni ba wo ho so omu kwachi colonial governor no eternity because now war bi abom ni asante for ekoko na governor ne ka kire won say gold omu wanyinara omu famra no omu fancy and after the war no ma baji omu ade war ne ende yom buy no governor ne say wa shipping ni na de ko UK ana bibifo no kum na ye wuni bafo ana abrofo no e buy o mba hye wuni bakuro ni na omu dija etu mu nti mama ye nuanom efutufo ankasa omu nka ho bi ye de menyanko ne ye ne medabi ana nzema so kwa nzema yini bi a ye so one sign bond of 1844 say ye slavery into one sign no ono so ye che ne ba ka kosu bekum no ni gold ni nyina omu fine dan nzema so also had ten as antefo golden stool no omu so the golden coconut abrofo ne fa omu gold mpacho nya honko denchirafo ne wan yesesa obi ya gold kwa
ti yes antefo kwa gold ne de ko
as antefo ne na say omu ani eba won so omu ni won prepare no mo aka na enye so omu tena ho eye quiet omu nyina ejapade wo ho uko nya Ghana hanso uko Nigeria Benin bronze bebre thousands of artifacts before the one saya etisenia nka Egypt for the one saya no ni nyina wo ho esese yetumi eko na yede ya no de ko na yaji yen ade ade ba ko pese ebo asantefo abaso ewo ho no na sikadwa kofi no eno de omo ntima amfa nka omutumi bo ho ban pa.
Okay,
Papa Nyamishirao.
So he said that it's true. The West or these European countries who came to colonize us and enslave us, they stole lots of our artifacts, our gold, our bronze, the bronze of the Benin people of Nigeria. When it comes to Nzema and Benipa, they stole their gold. But one group of people or one ethnic group or empire who were able to fight the white people and not allowing them to take most of their things, even though they took most of their things, but they didn't take the significant things or artifacts from them, were the Asante people who were able to fight against and protect their Sikedua Kofi, which is the golden stool. Yeah, that is one of those significant and important artifacts that the whites or the English people during the colonial times or the slavery times weren't able to take away from the Asante people, right? But apart from that and some significant things, most of our artifacts that were created by our artisans, our then artisans during those times, were taken away, they were stolen from them, right? Not all of them were necessarily like spoils of war. No, some of these things that they took it by way of convincing our leaders, our chiefs back then, right? And he gave an example that there was at one point the Asante people were fighting with the Biniba people, which are the Fanti tribe, the Fanti ethnic group. They were fighting with them, they were at war with them, and the governor then convinced the Biniba people to give them their gold, so they protect the gold for them. And after the war, they give them back their gold. So after the war, when the Biniba people came to the governor that, Governor, we are done with the war, give us back our gold. The governor told the Fanti people that he has shipped those gold artifacts to Britain. Because of that, the Biniba people were killed, they cut off his head. And that warranted the white people to come burn the whole Biniba community They burned their whole cities and villages down. So that perception that the whites took our gold artifacts because they were spoils of war, right? Because maybe they fought with these people, with us, and after defeating us, they took those artifacts because obviously they are spoils of war. That perception is not true, right? It's not entirely true, right? Most of them, they convince or they use manipulative tactics to steal or take this artifacts. So this is the end of today's episode, right? We talk about the genesis of xenophobia in South Africa, the causes of or the origin of this culture of South Africans now, right? What caused this thing, and why we shouldn't judge them or pass judgment on them, why we shouldn't blame them that much, because it's not their fault. Literally, basically, it's not their fault, right? When you find value in this video and you want to get back-to-back content just like this, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like, share, and comment. I go by the name Myanmar, and this is New News. Hope to catch you on the next episode. I'm out.